Okay, I'm just starting the streams. Just give me one more second. Did we finish the paragraph last time? We got up to the words Va'ata Yisbar. Is that what we're up to now?
I'm not 100% sure.
Right. Okay. I think so. I think we finished that paragraph. I was starting the stream. Okay. All right. So let's get started. Hold on. So okay, well, let's just do. Hi. How are you? Hope all's good.
Yeah. Baruch Hashem.
Start just.
How's everything by you?
Good. Baruch Hashem. Fast started about 10 minutes ago. So we're.
Okay.
Okay, so what we saw last time is he explained the difference between emuna and das, right? That's what he was focusing on. And today he's going to bring it all together and back to what we started with, that question of what the mitzvah of emuna is. But let's just do a quick review. So he explained to us that there's something called emuna, but emuna is like a makif, like a oros hamakifim, which are these lights, these that shefa that's like higher and above and outside. And it doesn't necessarily make it inside to affect us. That's emuna. But das is something that goes into a person. It goes into us and it affects us and it affects what we do and it affects our midos and how we function. And right, the job of us is to take that emuna, which is something that is more theoretical, and make it into das, bring it that it comes inside of us and that it affects us. And he explained this idea about ganva apum machtarta, right? That even a robber, the Chazal tell us, that could be on the edge of a house and is about to go and rob a house and commit terrible averas, but he'll still daven to Hashem because for him, his understanding and belief in Hashem remains with emuna, and therefore he could believe in Hashem, but it doesn't affect what he's going to do. He's about to go into averas, as opposed to das. Once it gets into a person and it goes down, like we saw, the concept of das among the spheros is sort of like the brainstem that brings the messages from the brain. It doesn't just stay up at the mochin. It doesn't just stay up as a concept. It brings it down into the guf, into the body, and into the midos. So that das is something that's inside of us, that has a much deeper effect on a person. So that's what he was explaining until now. Now we'll start from Va'ata Yisbar Das Mone HaMitzvos Shenechlaku Bazeh. So now he's going to explain how this concept al pi Kabbalah of this difference between emuna and das, and what these different levels of knowledge of Hashem or belief in Hashem are, how this relates to that original machlokas that we began with between the Rambam and the Bahag, etc. So let's take a look. Right, we may not be able to go the full hour. I realize that Vasikin starts a little bit before, so we'll try to go until I have to go to shul. Okay. Va'ata yisbar das monei hamitzvos shenechlaku bazeh yemimona ze b'minyan hamitzvos im lav. Right. So now we're going to explain how this relates to. You have it inside. You have where we are. The paragraph. It's in Bays, like letter Bays. The third paragraph in my sefer anyway. It's broken up. It's the third paragraph within Bays. Va'ata yisbar das monei hamitzvos.
Got it. Yeah.
Yemimona ze b'minyan hamitzvos im lav. Let me just do the. Okay, so the das Bahag, according to the Bahag, and the Bahag was the one who said you can't consider belief in Hashem as a mitzvah. Since a person knows something and it's just obvious, right? Like you said, the same way that it's obvious that we have a neshama inside of us, even though we can't understand that neshama, but it's clear that it's there. So, like you said, im kain lo yitachin tzivui al zeh ki tzivui ein nofel ela b'davar sheyesh bo bechira. Right? You can only call a mitzvah, a commandment, something that a person can choose to do or not to do. But just like you can't choose to believe that you have a neshama or not, it's so obvious, it's there. It's we're alive and functioning and moving and animated. It's not something that it's dependent on belief. So there's no choice to be found in that. So that's what the Bahag is saying, right? Im bedeos o b'machshava v'dibur lachshov v'lo lachshov l'daber lo l'daber lasos lo lasos, right? That's what mitzvos are. Mitzvos are either thoughts or speech or actions. Like a person can choose either to do something or not, say something or not. Aval davar hamurgash v'nira la'ayin. You can't make that into a tzivui. You feel it. You it's something that's a part of you. You know it. or you don't, but you can't make it a tzivui to feel it. It's a mitzvos. Sharei anu roim ha'olam chai v'kayim mechayei yachayim. Commotion is bar la'el, like he said earlier. Right? We see that the world is, has this living spirit in it that's animating it, that's making things go. L'chein lo monazu b'minyan mitzvos. So that's not able. We're not able to call that a mitzvah. That's just a mitzvah. Right? He's trying to explain now that it's not really a machlokas. That basically, like the Bahag and the Rambam are talking about two different inyanim. The emuna that the Bahag is talking about is that emuna of that what he calls that of that das, that's something that's just, it's known, like he said, you just experience it, it's a fact, and you can't make that into a mitzvah. However, according to the Rambam, is going to explain, the minimum is Omnam Harambam v'sayaso, Rabbeinu Yoda v'sayaso. However, the other Rishonim who do consider emuna a mitzvah, shemanu ze b'minyan mitzvos, they do count emuna as one of the mitzvos. Taimam ki atzivui al ha'amakas hadas v'hahisbonanos b'davar zeh hayadua. Shal zeh yitachein atzivui, right? That to bring it inside yourself, to make it into something that is not just that level of emunah, but that actually comes into us and affects what we do. So that is a tzivui. That is something that we have to work on to do. Ki gam she'adavar yadua. Because just like we said before, like the Ganav, he can know that there's Hashem, he believes in that Hashem. If you're not going to really contemplate this and think about it, and you're going to let your mind wander and consider other things, lo yo'il klum. So then that emuna that you have is not going to affect you. It's like, again, like that Ganav that's davening to Hashem. It's not going into his system to affect him. And even just thinking about it in a like a surface type of a way, eno klum. That doesn't count. It has to go into you. You have to really think about it in a deep way. V'az yiftechu hamidos, and then the it's going to be like that Pesach. It's going to be like that key that's going to open up the midos. That's what these two concepts are. V'yadata hayom. That's the knowledge of it, like the Bahag said, right? That's something that's obvious. That's not something that there's going to be a tzivui on. But the hashivos elvavecha, that is a tzivui. That's already something that we need to work on. We need to think about and contemplate and be mizbonin on Hashem and who He is and what He is and how He runs the world. Right, and that's what brings it into our system. That's going to affect us. V'gam hatzivui al hahamana b'mashi efshar lahasig b'das. Right, and furthermore, the aspect of emuna that you can't achieve with das, like he said earlier, right? That's also part of this mitzvah. Kanizkar le'el, like we said earlier. V'zeshachas of Rambam b'sefer mitzvos shatzivui hu b'hamanas elokus u'bereish sefer hamada amar leida sheyesham matzui rishon v'chulu. Right, to know that there is that initial entity. So the Rambam in his lashon is saying he puts both of these things in there. Shehem yedias mitziuso hanoda b'das v'gam ha'emuna bo v'hem mitzvah echad lahasem daito al zeh v'gam lahamin k'nizkar le'el. Okay, so he's saying that the Rambam, if you look in the lashon of the Rambam, is making a deal, saying you could see from the lashon of how the Rambam words this mitzvah that the concept of emuna is to have to work on it to bring it into our system, but still to have that belief that there's still everybody still has emuna, that again that makif that's on the outside that doesn't go away when you have the das on the inside. That concept of the makif, of that there's even what I believe in Hashem and I recognize Hashem. Part of that is to also recognize is that there's way more that I don't recognize and that I don't understand. Rabbeinu Yonah also is a shtei mitzvos, right? Rabbeinu Yonah, the way that he divides this up, like he explained this, earlier, Rabbeinu Yonah breaks this up into two separate mitzvos: mitzvos ha'emuna mipasuk anochi Hashem, or mitzvos hadas mipasuk v'yadata hayom. Right, so the one concept of emuna, that makif, that idea, that's the mitzvah of anochi Hashem in the Aseret Dibros, and the mitzvah of bringing it inside, right? That's v'yadata hayom hashivos elavavecha. That's mitzvah number 2. Okay, so he's just here. It's like sort of a technicality that the Rambam was kolel, incorporated both of these into one mitzvah, but the Rabbeinu Yonah breaks it into 2. V'amar v'zelashono. Umalas hasbonin begadluso yisbarach kamashakasa v'yadata. Right, you see that he brings this pasuk of v'yadata when he's talking about the concept of being misbonin on the gadlus of Hashem. Nimsru Rabbi mitzvos aseh. So that's a separate mitzvos aseh, a separate mitzvah to contemplate Hashem. V'chein kasav b'sefer hacharedim mishmo. So that's another sefer. V'zeh shekasav achinuch leda v'lahamin sheyesh eloka rotz lomar ma she'efsher leda yeda daika u'ma she'efsher leda yamin. Right. So again, those same two ideas, like the Rambam said, what you can know, and what you can't know, then you have to have emunah. On that part, Kamashi Isbar. The EU Beshitas Rambam Ka'azil, so right, the Sefer Mitzvos is going with the Rambam that puts them both into the same mitzvah. The Kachashiv Luba Mitzvah B'minyan Taryag. Okay, so he's just now sort of trying to explain based on this template that we saw last time that this is how we can understand the various shitos in the Rishonim, right? What they're referring to in their mitzvah of emunah or not. Right, we have like those three levels. You have the idea of the bahag that you can't even make into a mitzvah because it's so obvious that it's there. It's you either know it's there or you don't know it's there. That's not bichlal the mitzvah. Bichlal the mitzvah is making it into your heart and belief in that there's more than you'll ever know. And that question, whether that's one mitzvah or two mitzvahs, that's the machlokas between the Rambam and Rebbe Yonah. Okay, fine. V'hine ha'ikrim v'ha'esodos shetzarich kol echad misrael lahamin v'leda ne'emana b'metzius Hashem Yisbarach hem chamisha ikrim harishonim should be yud gimel ikrim. Okay, so we know the 13 ikrim of the Rambam, right? The 13 principles of faith, and the first 5, he tells us, those all revolve around the concepts that we're talking about. The first 5 of the Yud Gimel is going to go through them with us in a second. Shehevia Rambam Perek Yud de Sanhedrin, right? And that's the place where the Rambam deals with this. She Hadalid Heim Biur HaIker Harishon. 4 of them are this first concept, Shehu Metzius Hashem Yisbarach, what the existence of Hashem. Should we skip these this parentheses? Yeah, okay, we'll skip the parentheses. V'shar hashmona ikrim shetzarich kol echad b'Yisrael leda hem biur inyan Torah min hashamayim v'inyan schar v'onesh. It said, right? In other words, I don't know if I was teaching this yet in seminary when you were there, but I started teaching the third Yud Gimel Ikrim and Foundations of Faith. I don't know. Yeah, I did. Yeah. So when you look through the Ikrim, so they focus on different aspects, right? The first of them are all about Hashem, like about the stuff that we're talking about in this mitzvah. And then the rest of them are all dealing with either hashkacha or the Torah or the different aspects of the ways that Hashem interacts with us over here in the world, right? But the first 4 or 5, right? Those deal with Hashem himself. So he's going to go through it right now with us. So these 5 ikrim, the 5 ikrim that deal with the topic that we're learning here. So he's going to go through them now. Echad, shehu yisbarach mechuyev hametzius, dahainu shemetzius me'atzmuso ve'enu olol me'eza ila shekidmu lo chas v'shalom. Because number 1 is that Hashem is the only existence that has to be. This is, the Rambam speaks about this. That's the first ikr. There's no other entity that is mukhrach. There's no other entity that has to be. It's only Hashem that has to be, and that there was no cause for Hashem. He's the first cause of everything. Beis, Shehu Yisbarach Echad HaEmes. He's one, only one, not 2. Well, it's more than just not 2, right? The concept of Yichud Hashem. Gimel, She'enu guf v'lo koach b'guf, right? That Hashem is no physical form. He doesn't take on any corporeal or physical, any form like that. And Dalid, she'en lo hatalos bezman, right? Hashem was, is, and always will be. He's not bound by any time or anything like that. And the 5th, shehu yisbarach yesh lo yecholes bilti bal tachlis v'shapol baratzon umaniga olam be'atzmo v'lchein hu roi la'avdo. Ayin sham. Berosh Hashanah, Perek Zayin. Okay, so those are the 5. Those are the 5 ikrim that deal with Hashem himself, so to speak, right? That he has to be. Nothing forced him into being. He's the only thing that has to be. That he's only one. He has no physical form. He's not bound by time, and that he is the only will that is the will of everything, and that there's no ratzon that is against him. Right? And the Sefer Ikrim is not one of the Rishonim. So he says that the fact that Hashem is perfect, that he has no chisaron, that's also part of this. That's part of Hashem's infiniteness, and is that his perfection is infinite, right? Hashem is infinite in every which way. Shuhu hashleimus ha'amiti, that he's the complete perfection. Umemela shemasulak mishum chasarun chas v'shalom. Okay, and so those are the 5 ikrim that deal with Hashem, and he's just adding on this idea that the Rambam doesn't speak out explicitly Hashem's perfection and that he has no chisaron, but he's explaining that the Sefer Ikrim builds that into these 5. Okay, v'hine bebir inyan echad ha'emes. So now let's look at that idea, which is the second one. Okay, the one that Hashem is one. Hainu she'eno murkov mishum kichonios chas v'shalom ela pashat betachlis apshitos. Right, that Hashem is simple. Right, this is like he's not made up of parts. There's no different pieces and no different parts to Hashem. Hashem is a simple oneness, right? But betachlis apshitos, like in complete and utter oneness, right? It's simpleness. Simple is not the right word, but the idea that he's not made up of parts. There's no pieces and parts to Hashem. Okay, he's really moving into a completely different topic now, sort of from what we've been doing until now. Until now, he established the concept of emunah in Hashem, belief in Hashem, and what does that mean? I'm not going to go over it again now, the different aspects of what it means to believe in Hashem, but now he's moving on to the concept of what does that mean that Hashem is one, and this idea that he's not made up of parts and that he's one and simple. How does that work with the ways that we talk about Hashem? Because we talk about Hashem as if he has many different midos, and if he has different midos, so then those are different parts, so to speak, right? So how can we, on the one hand, say that Hashem is one and he's a complete and simple oneness, and at the same time refer to him in different ways? But if we refer to him sometimes, as Rachum and Chanun and all different expressions, so those seem to be parts of Hashem. That's not an entity that's only one. If you could talk about him in different ways. And this is a big, big question that the early philosophers, dealt with extensively. Right? We find all different ways that Hashem is described in the Torah. Right? So, that seems to be something like added on to Hashem, right? You have Hashem and his chachma, you have Hashem and his wisdom, Hashem and his chesed. How can it be that we refer to Hashem with all of these expressions of different aspects of him, and yet at the same time say he's only one? Okay, there's a huge question which is going to deal with now for a while. Okay. Well, so to understand this, Amar Rambam Beperek Beis Mehilchos Yesodei Torah. So the Rambam writes this and explains it in the following way. This is how he writes it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makir amito v'yodea osa kamoshi. Right, so Hashem recognizes his truth and knows it as it is. Hashem's yediyah is not like our yediyah. Right? There's a very famous line in the Rambam, right, that Hashem and his yediyah is one. He's going to get into this right now. Right? Whereas, for us, the way that we picture yediyah, the way that we picture knowledge or knowing something, it's like something separate from us. Right? We learn something, so now that's something new that we've learned that wasn't a part of us before, and now we've learned it and it becomes a part of us, right? But that's not how Hashem works. She'ein anu v'dei aseru echad, because we're not like Hashem. Us and our yedios are not one. Us and our yedios are two separate things. There's us, and then there's what we know. And we could forget things, we can learn new things, right? It's separate from us. Aval habori yisbarach hu v'deosav v'chayav echad mikol tzad umikol pina ubechol derech yichud, right? But Hashem is not like that. Hashem, and this is what he's going to be explaining now at length. Hashem, his knowledge and yediyah and all of the things that Hashem is are not separate from him. They are a part of him in every which way. If we would say that about Hashem, if we would liken Hashem's knowledge to the way that we know things, so then it would have to break godliness up into parts. There'd be this part of God and that part of God and another part of God, chas v'shalom, right? That's not how it works. Hu v'chaya v'deyaso, the ein adavar came. It doesn't happen that way. Ela echad mikol tzad mikol pina ubechol derech yichud. Right? I think all of this is still the lashon of the Rambam, right? That the Hashem's knowledge is one. Him and his knowledge and his essence is all one. Nimtzeis ata omer. This is the famous line from the Rambam, like this philosophical concept. Hu hayodea v'hu hayadua v'hu hadeya atzma hakol echad. Right? The knower and the knowledge and the combination of that together, it's all one. We can't even articulate this, right? It's sort of like any concept of Hashem when we start talking about infinite ideas, and we can't really express that concept in words, because we only have our way of relating to things, and the way that we relate to things is, us and our knowledge are two separate things, two separate parts, two separate pieces. But it's not like that with Hashem. Even though we can't say it, we can't really articulate this, because we can only use the tools that we have, right? We can't really hear this concept because it's beyond us. Okay, but like the concept of infinity, it's not the same concept, but similar to the concept of infinity, that Hashem is infinite. That we could say the words, but it's not. Doesn't mean that we understand it. We don't have the tools to actually understand and process what that concept is, right? We are here within the world of pieces and parts, and Hashem is beyond the world of pieces and parts. So Hashem and his knowledge and the knowledge itself, it's all one. It's all one when it comes to Hashem, even though that's a concept that we can't really process. Okay, that's what the Rambam writes. So we'll see that the even though we know the Rambam was like the arch rationalist, and they say he didn't have access to the Masorah of the Kabbalah. However, many times what the Rambam writes is very much in line with the way the Mekubalim understand it, and this is one of those cases. Kamash of Pachasav Bapardes Meharamak. Moshe Cordovero wrote a sefer called the Sefer Apardes. And he refers to Hashem in the same way over there. V'gam lafi Kabbalah Sa'arizal Yitziva Milsa besod hislabshus or Ein Sof Baruchu al yedei tzimtzumim rabim bekelim de Chabad de Atzilus. Okay, so let's just explain what he's saying over here, right? When we talk about Hashem, and he's going to get into this now, but when we talk about Hashem, and we talk about the different midos of Hashem and the different olamos, right, the different worlds. So the highest world is called the olam ha'atzilos. Beneath that is the olam ha'briya, and then the olam ha'yitzira, and then lowest is that the olam ha'asiya. And within the olam ha'asiya, there's also levels, and we exist in the lowest of the levels of olam ha'asiya, right? That's where we are. However, this whole construct going all the way up to like the very, very top of Atzilos, to Chachma, Bina, and Das of Atzilos, right? Like we saw last time, Chachma and Das and Bina and Das, those are like the mochin of the spheros, right? The highest levels. Again, we sometimes talk about Keser, Chachma, and Bina, or we talk about Chachma, Bina, and Das. So those are like the highest levels of Hashem in Atzilus, right? But that's already, even Atzilus is already in our world, right? What's above Atzilus, that's already something that we don't talk about, right? We don't talk about that part because Atzilus is itself already in the world of Tzimtzumim, right? So what he means by this is the concept of, right? We know that Hashem, at the beginning, there was this, infinite light, an Or Ein Sof, a light that, filled nothing. There was nothing to fill, but there was just this infinite light. And within that light, right, Hashem cleared out a place, right? He did this tzimtzum. He cleared out a place in order to make everything, time and place, and everything for us to be. So within the world of tzimtzumim, that's already where parts begin, right? But we know that Hashem goes beyond that, right? Even though Hashem comes into the world of the Tzimtzumim, and that's what we're going to be focusing on for a long time now, about how Hashem's midos operate over here in the world of Tzimtzum. But we know that Hashem goes outside of that and beyond that, And once we're talking about Hashem outside of the Tzimtzum, so that's Hashem, who's this, perfect oneness and this perfect shleimus and this, that we can't even articulate and we can't process, right? But the hislabshus of the or al yedei hatzimtzumim. This is the concept we're going to be talking about more. That when the light comes of Hashem, like through that kav that we spoke about, there's like this pipeline that comes into the tzimtzum. Once we're talking about the light that's coming into the tzimtzum, so that's going to have hislabshus on it. It's going to have layers piled on top of it. That's really what Atzilus and Bria and Yetzira are. Those are sort of like layers that are worn over that oneness of Hashem. And once we're talking about those layers, so yeah, those layers already have parts and pieces to them, but that's not Hashem himself, right? Hashem himself, so to speak, right, is the Hashem that's outside of Atzilus, the Hashem that is that perfect oneness and that perfect shleimus. The real Ein Sof, Hashem himself, right? Even Chabad Atzilus, which for us is like as high as we can possibly grasp the godless of Hashem, right? Because again, our minds can't go out of there. But already Chabad of Atzilus is already an incredible tzimtzum of Hashem, right? As unbelievably high and powerful, and how no human being, maybe Moshe Rabbeinu on Maimon Har Sinai, maybe was able to achieve an understanding of that aspect of Hashem, and that Chabad Atzilus is something that's way, 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 way beyond us and our ability to grasp. But even that already is way, way, way lower than Hashem himself. Ad shemahus ubechinas Chabad is going to say something here like unbelievable. Nechsheves ka'asiya gufanis etzlo yisbarach. Right? Even though to us, even the name Yud Ke Vav Ke, right? That like what we refer to as Hashem himself, so to speak. But even Yud Ke Vav Ke, Shem Havaya, is lower than Chabad of Atzilus. But even Chabad the Atzilus is like Klape Hashem, like a table, right? It's mamish like a physical thing. It compared to Hashem, even that incredibly, incredibly high spiritual level is rachok from Hashem, the same distance basically as a physical entity, right? He's trying to explain to us the incredible sort of, not disconnect because it's all connected, but the mental disconnect, or our ability to grasp that disconnect that happens. That even though we would see and learning Kabbalah and all the different layers and levels of Hashem and how high and unbelievable it is, but anything that we're talking about of Hashem is already the same as a table if we're looking at it from Hashem's perspective, right? Because from his infinite Ein Sof perfection place and total oneness place, once we're already talking about anything, that's already far, 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 far away from Hashem. Right? The lashon, this is the lashon of the pasuk of kulam bechachma asisa, meaning from chachma of Atzilus and down. That's where everything was made, so to speak. That's where all of the hislabshus happens and the tzimtzumim happen, and that we could already start talking about them. But that's not Hashem himself. That's okay. Ad kan lashon behagad belekutei amarim chelik aleph perek beis. Okay, that's the Sefer Tanya. So this little piece over here was a quote from the Baal HaTanya. Yeah, v'hirich bezeh sham chelik beis perek tes yuyin sham. Okay, so he's just introducing this concept to us now, and he's explaining to us this idea that Hashem himself is perfect. There's a perfect oneness and a perfect shleimus, and there's no parts and no pieces to him at all. That we talk about Hashem in ways that refer to him as a different parts or different midos, that's all within the world of tzimtzumim. That's all within the world of what Hashem already created for us, so much so that even the highest levels of ruchnius that we can possibly imagine, which is what he keeps on referring to as Chabad Atzilus, right? That's like the highest spiritual place that we can talk about and picture. That to Hashem is as far away as a table is from Hashem, because once you're crossing over from the infinite to the finite, even though that finite to us is basically infinite, right? That relative to our perception and our ability to talk about Hashem, that quote unquote finite part of that, those high spiritual places, right, that to us is everything, right? More than everything, right? Hashem Havaya itself is even lower than that. However, to Hashem, it's as far, right? When you're going from infinite to finite, so it's just degrees of finiteness, right? This mouse and this table are also finite to relative to Hashem, and that's why he uses his lashon, like you won't see this anywhere else, right? I'm saying that meaning anytime in the learning of Kabbalah and all of this, so like the highest spiritual levels that we can even talk about are here, Chabad Atzilus, but we have to understand that all of that is relative to us, but relative to Hashem, it's as if it's physical because it's so far in. Okay, so let's see what he's going to explain now. Ubira inyan lahavin mashikosov. So what does he now? I want to explain this idea. He said, what he started with, that when we're talking about Hashem, we're talking about Hashem starting from Chabad Atzilus, but not higher than that. Dahainu shesham lo yitachei lomar afilu hu hayodea v'hu hadeya. Right, just like the Rambam when he was talking about earlier, Hashem is the knowledge and it's all one and it's all right. Even that is already within the Tzimtzumim. Like I said, right, under normal circumstances, Chabad Atzilus to us is basically infinite. Relative to us, that's already Hashem in that place that we can't possibly relate to. That Hashem and His knowledge and all of those things are one, but still, that's within the Tzimtzumim. To talk about Hashem out of the Tzimtzum, we wouldn't even use those words. We wouldn't even use the words Hu Hayodea v'Hu Hadeya. There is no concept of Deya and Yediya outside of the Tzimtzum. The Ella Eichu v'Chulu. What's he referring to over here? I'm not sure where these words were. I'm not sure where what this is. I'm not sure where do you know where that is?
I lost the spot because I was taking notes.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure where what he's quoting from over here. I'm not sure what he means over here. But okay. But this idea of is it going back to the Rambam? Okay. I'm not sure. But I think he's saying that the same idea that these concepts that we were just talking about in the Rambam that we can't possibly relate to and can't possibly understand, but that's already again within the Tzimtzumim. Okay, now he's going to. Okay, there's a famous question here. Okay, V'hine Hagon Hamakubal Rabbi Yehuda Loi ben Rebbe Tzalel Miprag. Okay, it's talking about the Maharal Miprag. Rabo Shalatos Yom Tov, right? The Tosfos Yom Tov was one of the Gedolim buried in Krakow, was actually one of the Gedolei HaAchronim, and he was a Talmud of the Maharal. So he's talking about this. B'Hakdamaso LeSifro Gevuras Hashem. So that's one of the Sfarim of the Maharal, Gevuras Hashem. So in the Hakdama to that Sefer, Hisig Me'od Al Das HaOmrim U'Metarim Oso Shehu Hayodea V'Hu Hadeya V'Chulu. Okay, so over there, the Maharal argues on the Rambam, and he's going to do the same thing over here. He's going to do a similar thing. He's going to show us how the Maharal argues on the Rambam, but he's going to show us how really they're referring to two different aspects of Hashem, two different parts of Hashem. Okay, Va'amar V'Zelashono. Okay, this is now the Maharal speaking. Re'ei shehem omrim alav sha'atzmuso seichel mufshat. Okay, Hashem is himself. Atzmuso is a seichel mufshat. It's just a seichel. How do you define that? Just an intelligence, right? But it's mufshat. There's nothing to it. There's no parts to it. The kol seichel hu sheyodeya hadavar benafsho kamoshu hu chutz lenafsho. V'imkein yeh hu yisbarach nismach al asher alulim mimenu via alul kodem ha'ila. Okay, this is a hard one to say. Okay, in Yomru Shuhu Masig Atzmo Shuhu Siba Le'elu Nivraim Asher Mimenu Nimtzu V'Yomru Shaseicha V'Maskel V'Muskal. Right, the same Davar Echad Kamo Sharichu B'Dvar Ma'ele. I'm just going to read it through and then I'll try to explain it. So the Maharal writes, and I find it very confusing the way that he writes. Let me just read it through, and then I'll try to explain outside what he's saying. Via mashamasig atzmo shehu siba lemtzayim hu ba'atzmo hamusag v'hamuskal hine acher kol elu advarim asher amru hadavar batal umavutal. V'zeu ki aseichel hu miyuchad bedavar kamo she'ata omer ki inyan aseichel hu yedias hadavar kamo shehu ve'en el Hashem yisbarach geder klal sheyugdar ve'im ata omer she'atzmuso seichel. Okay, so basically he's saying the way that the Rambam writes it, he disagrees with it, because the way that the Rambam writes that Hashem is the knowledge and the knower at the same time, because that lashon of the Rambam, that hu hayodea v'hu hayadua v'hu hadeya atzma, all of those things. He's saying you're already talking about something, right? You're already talking about a seichel. You're already talking about an intellect, which is a thing, right? L'chein ein lomer shehu yisbarach misyached bedavar lomer alav shehu davar zeh miyuchad v'lichfichach sachlu haomrim she'atzbuso seichel. Right? So even to call Hashem this, even to refer to Hashem as a seichel, to refer to Hashem as the knower, that's incorrect to say. We can't say a word about Hashem. He's a simple existence. Lo yugdar b'ma ve'en. You can't be magdir him at all. Right? Even to call Hashem the knowledge and the knower, you're already, it's like self-referential, which you can't be about Hashem. Ve'en inyan zeh seichel. But we can't talk anything about Hashem. We can't say a word. We can't even say hu hayodea v'hu hadeya. V'ulai yomru im ein atzmuso seichel v'geshem chas v'shalom lomer alav im kein mahu yisbarach nashuv lahem v'chi neshama shebeguf ha'adam yuchal la'amod ala mitasa kol shekein v'chol shekein borei hakol she'ein lishol alav kushya zos ki lo yiranu ha'adam v'chai. Right. In other words, the Maral argues on the way that the Rambam answers this question, right? The question of the philosophers of, again, how can we say Hashem is one and he's a simple oneness when we know that there are, parts and elements and aspects of Hashem that we talk about. So the Rambam said it's Hashem's knowledge is not the same as our knowledge, right? That was his answer. The Maral saying you can't even say that. Even to say that about Hashem is wrong, because you're already qualifying Hashem as something. You're already talking about Hashem as a seichel, and we can't. The pasuk says, "Lo yirani ha'adam v'chai." We can't see Hashem and live. There's no way to understand anything about Hashem. V'chol hadvarim tuchal lulmud mishemosav hakadoshim. The only thing that we can ever talk about are the shemos of Hashem. Ki shem ha'etzem ba b'lashon havaya lilmod ki zehu atzmuso. Aval seichel ein ze havaya bilvad v'tavin elu advarim ma'od. Okay, so it's very hard to understand exactly how he presents this argument, about the seichel and the muskal. But basically, the idea that the Maral is saying is that he disagrees with the Rambam. He holds that what the Rambam calls Hashem, or how the Rambam describes Hashem, that Hashem is the knowledge and the knower and everything at once. Even that already is a lowering of Hashem. Right. So again, he's going to answer it by saying at this, that they're talking about different facets of Hashem, and whatever. We'll see that in a second. Okay, ad kan lashonu. That's his question on the Rambam. V'amar od shelachein karu chazal hakadosh baruch hu v'lo nikra haseichel baruch hu. Right. We refer to Hashem as hakadosh baruch hu. Right, because kadosh is something that we can't relate to, as opposed to haseichel baruch hu. Right, we don't call Hashem the knowledge blessed. Ki amitas atzmo lo nuda. We can't know anything about Hashem himself. Rak shehu nivdol mikol geshem beguf mikol hanimtzayim. The only thing that we can know about Hashem is that he's not anything that we know. That's all that we can know. Valzeh nemar kadosh baruch hu. She'inyan kadosh nemar al nishu nivdal. Right, because kedusha is something that's separate. Right, that's they say kedushin. The concept of kedushin when a person gets married, because now these people are separated from everybody else. Right, Hare at mikudeshet li, we say to a woman, right? You are now separated for me, which means you are now separated from everybody else. That's the concept of kedusha, and that's why we refer to Hashem as Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We can't use any other term to talk about Hashem, because any term that we're using is already wrong. It's already using a word that we can relate to describe Hashem, even seichel or knowledge or anything like that. Because Hashem himself is, completely pashut, betachlis apshitus, in complete and total simpleness. Right? There is nothing separate from him. Right? But once you talk about something that's differentiating it from something else, right? You're defining this as opposed to that, right? But we can't talk about that about Hashem. There is no parameter to Hashem. There is nothing separate from him. V'im kain hu yodea hakol v'hu yachol hakol v'chol ze mipnei she'ein lo geder yugdar b'davar miyuchad u'b'shvil ze hakol nimtza mi'ito gam kain kamoshi yisbar. Ad kan l'shalom. Okay, so basically the whole idea that he's saying is that even to refer to Hashem as a knowledge or as a knower, that's already wrong. It's already lowering Hashem. It's already talking about Hashem in words that don't apply to him. Okay, that's the end of the Maharal. Okay, so this is the famous question that Maharal levels against the Rambam, and and says why the Rambam is the rational way of looking at Hashem, the way the Rambam describes it, is making a huge mistake, because it's already talking about Hashem using terminology that we can relate to. Hashem, hu hayodea v'hayadia v'hadei atzmo. That even that you can't apply to Hashem. Okay. Right, so he obviously the Maharal is certainly correct about this. Ki atzmuso eino begeder mada klal chas v'shalom. Right, because if we're talking about Hashem, his atzmos, Hashem himself, Hashem, who's again a l'mayla mechabad atzilos, outside of the tzimtzum, of course that entity we can't say anything about. We can't, he's higher, infinitely higher than anything that we can talk about. This, it's something that we can't possibly grasp and can't imagine. Anytime that we're thinking about these aspects of Hashem or these midos of Hashem, whether it's his chachma or his chesed, we can only think about how those apply to us. Right? We can only think about chesed the way that we picture chesed, and we can only picture seichel the way that we consider what seichel is. We can only picture those as they are with us. Right, the highest level of anything in the Nevrayim is again this concept of Chachma, Kulam b'Chachma Asisa, Reishis Chachma, right? This concept of Chachma being the start of anything that we could even start to talking about Hashem. But all of that is talking about Hashem again, that's within the Tzimtzum. The highest way that we can possibly conceptualize Hashem is using that word chachma, right? Again, chachma, A, being the highest sphera that we can talk about, and B, the concept of chachma, as in wisdom and knowledge, being the highest level of what we can refer to something as, like something who is the uber chacham, right? That's the what knows everything that's happening, right? That's the highest that we can possibly talk about or grasp. Even that idea of saying that Hashem is the knowledge and the knower at the same time, that even that is above what we are able to grasp. Right, because we can only understand Chachma the way it is with us, and with us it is something that is separate from us. Right? Even the Rambam's definition of the Yodea and the Yediyah and the Deya Atzmo, even that we can't really understand. but that's already within the world of Chachma. Again, that's what the Maharal is taking issue with. To refer to that as Hashem, as the highest manifestation of Hashem, that's a mistake. Again, he ka'asiya gufanis mamish lagabi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But to talk about that level of Hashem, again, the Rambam's definition of Hashem, the talking about Hashem as he starts from that place called Chachma in the Olam Atzilus, again, that itself is like a physical thing, like a table, right, compared to Hashem himself. Shu kadosh umuvdal upashat betachlis hapshitus. Hashem, again, himself is completely separate from anything. V'nimna mitztayer b'dasa adam. Right, that we can never possibly grasp that and understand that at all. Okay, so again, he's explaining to us this concept of the even the highest place that the Rambam ever goes to talk about Hashem, right, which is this place of Hu Hayodeya, V'Hadiya, V'Yodiya, Atzmo, and even that is not something that we can possibly understand and articulate, like the Rambam says, but even that is not really Hashem himself. Even that is already only talking about Hashem within the Tzimtzumim. And that's why the Maharal has a hard time with it, because that's not actually Hashem. The actual quote-unquote Hashem is much, much higher than that, right? Infinitely higher than that. V'hine al inyan zeh hu shenofa lashon emuna. This aspect of Hashem, the fact that there's more than anything we can possibly understand, that even the Yediyah aspect of Hashem that the Rambam says, that is already infinitely lower than Hashem himself, that's where we can talk about what we refer to as emunah, right? Because that's not something we could possibly understand. Lahamin b'mahusa yisbarach shu ram v'nisa revavos madregos ein kates mebechinas geder chachma. Right, that even though, again, in all Sifrei Kabbalah and all the writings of the Arizal and all of those things, we talk about all the different levels and all the different worlds, and Chachma Atzilus is mamish, again, it's even higher than Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's higher than anything we can imagine. But even that, compared to Hashem himself, it's like something physical. It's infinitely far from Hashem himself. Shehi Amayla Harishona ben Ibrahim. Chachma Atzilus is, yes, it's this highest as we can go as Nivraim, as creations who can consider and contemplate and think and talk about Hashem. That's as high as we can go. Hagam shelo yuchol etzayer malchus zebedaito, even though even that we can't possibly grasp what that means. Elalaham min amuna shlema kavua hachluta believe shekenhu. Even that we can only have emuna in that idea. We can't understand it because even that is higher than our ability to understand. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Anochi Misha Anochi Shuhu Mahusa Vatmuso, the less machshava tvisa bei. Right, I am the Hashem that no thought can possibly grasp him. Lahakir Mahu, to understand him. Eluhu Bilvad V'dai Lavin V'hi Hanirtza B'tzivoy Hamana. Okay. Okay, so we'll finish up over here, but he's saying that, so to address again the Maharal's question on the Rambam, the Maharal tells us that even the Rambam's definition of Hashem is like hashpala. It's lowering Hashem to talk about Hashem that way, because you're already referring to Hashem using terms that we can relate to, even though you're telling me that we can't relate to the way that those terms apply to Hashem, but you're already using terminology. And the Maharal says, no, that's wrong. Hashem himself is way beyond that. So he's telling us that, right, they're talking about two different, he's going to get into this more next time, we're talking about two different relatings to Hashem himself, quote unquote, right? The Rambam talking about Hashem himself within the Tzimtzumim, right? And that's higher than we can ever possibly grasp. That concept again of Hu Hayodeya, V'Hu Hayodua, V'Hu Hadeya Atzma, that's something that we can't possibly understand, but that's already within the Tzimtzumim, that's already within the worlds Hashem created for us. However, if we're talking about Hashem himself, Hashem that's outside of Atzilus, so that's what the Maharal is referring to. That's when we can't even say anything. All we can say is Kadosh, right? He's just separated. He's completely different, because even the Rambam's explanation of Hashem, b'yachas to Hashem himself, it's like a physical thing. Okay, good.
Awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great. Mirza Hashem will continue. Okay, you should have a very good fast. Make sure you daven well today. It's an important day to daven today and Purim. Mirza Hashem, you should. Okay, have a great day.
Okay, will do. Yeah, have an easy fast.